Welcome to another program, the Veterans of the Cedar Valley. My name is Sid Morris, and my guest today is Bob Demeyer, who is a historian at the Grout Museum in Waterloo, and Robin Venter, who is the, what's your title again?
Exhibit curator.
Exhibit curator. And I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you.
We're going to talk today about a program that you are presently working on, and will be going on for probably all summer, and that is a 50-year celebration of the Vietnam War. And Bob? Let's start with you. What are some of the things that you're doing to celebrate the 50-year celebration of the Vietnam War?
Well, I think as we started to think about this process, we recognized that 50 years ago, when a lot of the Vietnam veterans came back, they were not recognized for their service. In fact, they were sort of badly abused for their service. Mm-hmm. And so I think first and foremost, the idea is to give them a welcome home, to give them a vote of appreciation for their service. So within that context, we've been working, Robin, myself, the entire crew over at the Grout Museum have been working as how we can set up an exhibit that will address both the issue of welcoming people back and then telling a whole new generation about what these young men and women did when they were in service in Vietnam, because 50 years is a long time.
Yes, it is. And not too long ago, you celebrated the 50th year of the Korean War.
That's exactly right.
And also World War II. And and you're doing the very same thing with your testimonials that you're going to tape and present on PowerPoints.
Right. And I think what my role is in this is to collect the oral histories, to collect the personal stories. When the Sullivan Brothers Iowa Veterans Museum started back in the planning in 2005, 2006, after interviewing a few people, we realized that the best way to tell the story of any soldier is to get their own words. And so these oral histories, which started out to be maybe 20 or 30, we're now up to about 1,500 videotaped interviews, of which we have about 230, 240 from the Vietnam era. I mean, we were interested in the World War II generation because of age. You know, the Korean War veterans aren't old yet, like yourself, Sid, but they're getting there. Right. You know, some of those Vietnam area veterans are in their 70s, and we want to make sure we get a good representation.
That's right. Well, I can tell you that when I helped Mrs. Meyer line up the Korean War vets, and they were very enthusiastic about the project. I'd like to play now some testimonials for folks that have already volunteered to testify.
I was known to walk pretty fast. So when we wanted to get someplace in a hurry, like let's say we're in the field and the company says we're going back to LZ Center for our 2-day bunker guard. Now that's a good duty, because now you're going to have hot meals and you actually have a bunker to sleep in. You're not out in the open. And we have a mosquito net over the door so you can keep the mosquitoes off you and stuff like that. So that was a good thing. So they say, write her up, and they'll ask me, they'll say, get us back to LZ Center. So we'll shoot my course and I'll take off walking, and I'll be pretty fast because we're wanting to get back to LZ Center and everybody will be pushing me to do that. So we did that one day, and I'm headed back to LZ Center, and I'm walking fast. I'm thinking, you know, it's getting late in the day, and we're going to get back there so that we don't have to spend another night in the field. And I got to walking, and I turned around and looked, and there was nobody behind me. So now I panicked a little bit. So I waited, and nobody came. I waited a little more and nobody came. And right to my right on this trail was this rock ledge. So I crawled up this rock ledge thinking that I could look back down the trail and see how far back they were. I pushed through the bushes, and when I pushed through those bushes, I was standing in the middle of a bunch of NVA. The NVA were around a small fire. There was some in hammocks. There was a couple out in the open pointing down the trail. They were all over. So, of course, I'm pointing. I'm ready to go. So I shot up the rounds I had and then turned and jumped back down that little rock wall and took off, probably at a new world record sprint back towards my company. Luckily, they were back down the trail a ways, and I'd say I ran completely past the first platoon before they got me stopped.
One happened to me that I mean, it could have killed me. We would switch the watch, and we switched weapons to the person that was taking over our part of the Jeep. You know, if I was a petty officer, then the petty officer that was taking over would switch. And of course, we had to clear all weapons before we had to switch them, you know. And the process normally was, you know, take your .45, pull your clip out, you know, jack around, make sure that the round isn't there, and actually click it, you know, hold it up and click it. Well, this person came up to me on a cement sidewalk, and right in front of me, took his weapon, dragged it back, and shot it right down by my feet, and he didn't take the clip out.
And these are some of the pictures, Robin, that you brought. And,
Yes.
And would you like to talk about those,
Well,
please?
in fact, both of those gentlemen, Rick Ryder and Steve Weichert, are on our committee. We have a committee of, it's probably about 8 or 9 Vietnam veterans helping us develop this exhibit. And they have been kind enough to give us photographs during their Vietnam experience. Yeah. And I believe we have one of Rick. I can't remember if we brought one of his or not, but I've brought in some. This is Jimmy Schmitz, who's also on our committee. And that's Tom Brickman, who is on our committee, but he also was the person that was involved in getting the Faces to Go with Names project going. He and his daughter collecting the faces of the Vietnam veterans who were killed over in Vietnam. And that's going to be part of the exhibit as well. And Tom is doing other things. That's Rick Ryder, I believe. And this is Norbert or Brett Podasky, who was one of the KIAs in Vietnam, was in the Air Force, and I believe he's from southern Iowa somewhere. His wife recently donated items and pictures. And
so those fellows will be giving their testimonies in the project.
I think Rick Ryder, who is the first of the two excerpts, lives in Devonsdale and has a great perspective of what it was like to be in combat. He also has a very nice sort of subtle humor to say that, well, this is a deadly business. You know, I was the fastest guy, so they always put me up front. Steve Weichert from Cedar Falls here had a job that basically was logistical, keeping things going, and as well as being an MP. And so both of them represent a lot of what happened in the field in Vietnam.
One of the questions that we came up with when we did the Korean one, I'm sure you'll come up with the same question. In fact, I know you will because I get it quite often, is who's eligible to be in the program and what determines the eligibility geographically and everything?
Surely. The Sullivan Brothers Iowa Veterans Museum talks about Iowa veterans, so if you were, as we say, lucky enough to be born in Iowa or to go to school in Iowa or smart enough to marry somebody from Iowa, we would like to include you. So there's, maybe a 10 or 15 year rule. You might have come from someplace else, but if you spend most of your life working and living in Iowa, we want it to be as broad as it can be, and it's an entire state. I mean, all 99 counties. We have oral histories from I think 75 counties out of the 99, and our goal is to get at least a few representative interviews from every county across the state. We're a little bit more top heavy, let's say, in the eastern Iowa, but you know, we just want to be sure that everybody is represented.
Let's talk a little bit how a veteran, let's you know that they're interested in doing the program? How do they enroll? And
there are several ways. I think the most convenient way now is that we have a museum website, and if you just go to one of the browsers and type in Grout Museum District, our web page will come up, and there are instructions there to in the veteran section that you can do that online. For some people who are perhaps a little less in tune to internet, probably the easiest way is to call the Grout Museum. It's 234-6357, and ask for Bob or Robin, and we'll make sure that that information gets. We do interviews in the museum. We do interviews in people's homes. We do interviews in some of the nursing homes, because people are now perhaps a little bit more limited in their mobility. But we'll come to them, or if they would like, they can come to us.
Good. And so the website is?
Grout, help me out here, groutmuseumdistrict.org. Yep,
Okay.
right. Yep.
Okay.
You type it in and it'll come up.
All right. We have about 3 minutes left in this segment, but the thing that how are they displayed technically in the museum? I was rather fascinated when I went over and punched the button and got mine.
There you were. Well, a couple of ways. When you come into the museum, there are some kiosks that you can go to, type in your name. There'll be a bit of information about the individual, and then there'll be a 30, 45-second video clip, an expert of this, much like Steve Weikert's was. And then you can go into the library and you can dial up the entire interview, whether it's 60 minutes or 30 minutes. They're all available, and of course, everybody who does an interview gets a free, complimentary copy of that interview for their own use. So, you know, and if you want more, we can, for a small fee, we can provide that. But come to the museum, the kiosk gives you that short segment. The library gives you the full 60 minutes.
Okay, that's new to me. I didn't know that you can get the full interview.
You can get the full interview right there, and that's fun. We have people coming in who maybe from out of town who have the opportunity to sit down for the hour and watch it, and of course we have people coming in who've never heard the story. You know, and that still happens.
Yeah, sure does. In fact, I even watched mine the other day when I was at the museum. So, well, anyway, well, that is we need to take a short break, but we'll come back and discuss further the project that you have going, and we appreciate that. We'll be right back after this word.
We all know that the Cedar Valley is a great place to live and work. And there are many individuals and organizations that are doing their part to improve the quality of life for everyone that calls this their home. On Serving the Valley, we sit down with these service organizations to learn more about different projects and events that need your support. We all need to do our part to help out our community. Tune into Serving the Valley to learn more.
Dear CFU, we had Rick out today to inspect our gas furnace and fireplace. He noticed the fireplace logs were installed wrong back when our condo was built and fixed them. Then he installed my new furnace filter, which usually takes me half an hour and a few choice words I learned in Cleveland. If all of your employees are like Rick, you have a great team. Thanks for the great service.
Cedar Falls Utilities. Our family serving your family.
Welcome back. Our Veterans of the Cedar Valley program today is on the Grout Museum recognition of the Vietnam War, 50-year recognition. And we have some materials, display items that are here, and Robin, would you talk to us about those
Sure.
and how people, if they have some items, how do they contact you and so on and so forth?
Well, as you know, we have the Vietnam War is showcased in our permanent exhibit in the Sullivan Brothers Iowa Veterans Museum. But this summer, we're having a special temporary exhibit in the museum too. That's going to be up from July 14th, 2015 to July 16th, 2016. And it's called 365 and Counting, Iowans in the Vietnam War. And we gave it that name basically because so many of the interviews and people we've talked to said we were over in Vietnam for 365 days. And so the war is about the veterans that served during the exhibit's about the veterans that served during the Vietnam War. And the items you see on the table here come from one of the veterans that Bob interviewed. And he was a helicopter. Bob can tell more of his story, but he flew in a helicopter, and he lent us these items, his helmet and jacket and bag and other things as well, boots too, and he gave us a bunch of stuff to borrow for the exhibit. And because of this, we're still looking for other items to help tell our story. So obviously we can, with his items, with Mr. Bookout's items, we can tell the story of helicopters in the Vietnam, which were so prevalent and important to the war.
Absolutely.
And we're looking for things. I'm looking really hard for items from the Coast Guard, which is pretty hard in Iowa to find something from the Vietnam War or from the Coast Guard during the Vietnam War. But I mean, that's just one example. We're looking for everything that, you know, to help tell these stories. So basically the way to notify me if you do have artifacts or photographs or things that might be of interest for this story is just to call the museum at 319-234-6357 or go online and at our Grout Museum District website.
And so it's a temporary loan then of these materials?
Yes, although there are some of the soldiers or veterans who want to donate items that will then stay in our permanent collection, but for the most part we're interested in temporary loan. They don't have to donate them, but maybe be willing to give them up for a year to be put on display.
Right. And that's one of the needs right now of the museum, is to get items like this from Vietnam veterans.
Yes.
Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about these and the gentleman who donated this?
This is from Steve Bookout. Steve is from Newton. He belonged to, I think it was a 372 engineer aviation group. He was a helicopter pilot. One of his primary responsibilities, he actually did 2 tours. The first time around he was doing medevac, taking people out of fire zones to the hospital. The second time around, he was in a helicopter that provided the cover. Those units became pretty specialized because these were the guys who went in first, had a couple of M60s on either door and circled around and took the fire from the ground while the medevacs sort of slipped in and did the evacuation. His group was called, the insignia was the Razorbacks, and it had became one of the more prominent helicopter groups during that period. He was able to bring a lot of things back from Vietnam. Not everybody was, but Steve was, and so we are very appreciative that he is loaning to us for the year his helmet, and the bag, and then we can pull up. There is a vest over there to my left. There we go. Survival vest with a wide range of things from compasses, netting, a blanket, food, sort of everything you needed to survive, because what happened was that helicopters went down, and they did not always go down in friendly territory. And so Steve had that, and bless his heart, he kept all that, and then he's willing to lend it to us. So we have his interview, and he has shared with us these things for the year.
Helicopters were so important even in Korea.
That's right.
It brings back a lot of memories for me. However, the equipment's different than what we had in Korea, but I remember that distinctly.
And one of the things that we're finding as we have people come through and either do interviews or in our permanent exhibit, and as Robin said, that is there and will continue to be there, is the sound. It's the sound of the rotors. It's a whump, 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 whump. And when anybody who has been there hears that, that almost immediately brings them back to a moment in time 50 years ago. And so in the temporary exhibit that's being developed by Robin and her associates, that's one of the things they're going to integrate into it. It's that ambient sound, but it's given just a little bit of, jogs that memory a little bit. What was it like?
I think that's an excellent idea, because helicopters since Korea have been so important and more.
That's exactly right.
And so that's an excellent idea. That'll be fun. It'd be great to see.
Some of the other things, I'll let Robin, she knows the story better, but we had a woman come in who was a friend of our executive director, Billy Bailey, and she lost her husband literally at the end of the war, and so she brought some of his personal things in, and then she brought some letters. I'll let Robin tell you about the letters, because that's tough.
He talks, he actually was a pilot over in Vietnam, and he talks about planes during the monsoon season crashing into mountains and stuff because they couldn't see, and stuff. And he talked in one of his last letters home, he talks about a plane that had recently crashed into the mountainside. And he was getting ready to leave, and he was 2 days short of leaving, and he hopped on the plane as a passenger to go to where he was going to then head home, and his plane crashed into a mountain, and I think there were 2 survivors, but he wasn't one of them. He wasn't one of them. He died, and so it was kind of these things, letters and items like that, that just kind of makes the war, real, and and what these guys went through, and what the families back home went through too. And throughout the exhibit, we're going to have a home front area. We're going to have other spaces, a timeline that tells about how the war and how it unfolded over the 13 years or so. I think from 62 to 75 is what we're covering on the timeline. And we're going to have a bunker type area that shows how the guys, had lived day to day and what they had to do just to survive. And it will be a really interesting story. It's a big, huge story to try to tell in a 2,000 square foot exhibit space, but we're working really hard to do this, and I guess what's kind of keeping us grounded is the fact that we're trying to tell their story. So we're trying to keep it to the lives of the Iowans, the guys that served over there, and the girls.
Our local veterans groups here in the Cedar Valley, there are a number of Vietnam members who are now active they're becoming more and more active in the organizations. For a while they did not, but then recently I've seen more and more of them. Do you have some marketing materials or some way that we can get the word out to these folks and encourage them, because some of them need encouragement?
I think that is we're moving into that part of the process in the next month or so as we get the Welcome Home Parade set up, which is the middle of July 17th. That information will be coming out, and we'll be going to both the service posts, to the county VA offices, and then we'll just put a whole box of them in your trunk, Sid. So as you go around, you can just pass them out, right?
Well, I tend to get around to most of them.
Yes.
Like I mentioned, we have this committee of Vietnam veterans who are from the area, but other towns around the area, and they know people outside the area. So they're using their connections too to get the word out, and we've gotten a lot of stuff and photographs, and we've even gotten people from, you know, an hour away or something that said they'd like to participate in the parade. So the word is getting out there one way or the other.
Right. Well, that's great, because, you know, locally that's fairly easy, but it's the surrounding areas that.
And we're going to come up, and that's Tom Brickman, who's on the screen right now. And Tom and his daughter Sherry took this project on. Tom's from Janesville. He's one of those veterans who didn't talk about his experience. And then about 3 years ago, he was at the memorial wall, Vietnam Memorial Wall, realized that they were collecting photographs of those people who died during combat. They didn't have many from Iowa, so Tom took that project on. It's called Faces to Go with Names, Faces to Go with those people who didn't come back. And that's going to be an integral part of this exhibit as well.
Right.
And the
go ahead.
The other thing that Tom did too is we're going to put dog tags. We've created a dog tag. Tom created a dog tag of each one of the veterans that were killed over in Vietnam, and those are going to be strung along the timeline.
That'll be great
as well.
And now we have a couple of minutes left. Could we review how people contact you again? If you could.
Well, you can call the Grout Museum, 319-234-6357, and ask for either Bob or myself. Or you can contact us at the Grout Museum District website, which you can either put it in one of the search engines, Grout Museum District, or go to www.groutmuseumdistrict or gmdistrict.org.
Yeah. We want to emphasize that this is for all Vietnam members, veterans in Iowa.
That's right. And we will continue to do interviews with other veterans who are World War II, Korea, or what we call Iraq and Afghanistan. But for the next few months, we would like to concentrate on that Vietnam generation.
But you're still doing Korean and so on. Because every once in a while I run into somebody who said, you know, how come I'm not in that, you know? And so
we'd be always happy to catch up and do that as well.
Well, good. Well, this has been very interesting, and I thank you folks for coming today and presenting your program.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
We want to promote it as much as we can and in the area. So thank you again. And we'll be back with another program of the Veterans of Cedar Valley.